Okay, we start Genesis 7 today. We're in the middle of the story of Noah and the ark. And let's do a quick review of where we left off with chapter 6. We're told, if you remember how the story of Genesis 6 really begins, before we get to the flood, we're given the reason for it. And what's the reason? Why would God send a flood to the earth that will destroy pretty much everything?
To save a remnant?
He will save a remnant, but why would he want to destroy everything? That's the question.
Because the heart of everyone was evil.
Yeah. Some of the, the charge laid out is verse 5. The Lord saw the wickedness of man was great, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So he starts with that charge against mankind of what the Lord sees. The Lord sees the heart, and he says he sees before anyone else sees that the heart of man is only evil all the time. And how does he feel about that?
Could you make that a little bigger, please, Pastor?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Says that he was sorry that he made man on the earth.
Yeah. He responds to it like the father that he is. He is grieved, and he is sorry. He feels regret, and there's a pain in this of him toward what's become of mankind. He's not flying off the handle in rage and anger. He will bring destruction. He will bring justice, but he is slow to bring it because he is a father, and it grieves him to his heart. It's a really powerful statement there on the nature of God. And then it says in the next part, as we got to the last slide, that it speaks now about the first condemnation spoke about the heart, the inclinations of man. And then we see that played out, how did the evil in the heart of mankind manifest itself in the world? What did that look like from a human perspective? What did God see there outwardly? We saw inwardly his heart. What does he see outwardly?
He sees Cain and Lamech, for one thing, murdering people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The evil of Cain's heart is revealed in the murder of Abel and Lamech as well. And the whole earth now is filled with violence. All flesh had corrupted their way on earth. So he lays out this picture for us of just despair. It's almost like you can see it where you've come to a place where there's just the barbarians are running the place. If you're a woman, you're going to be raped. If you're a man of any means, you're going to be murdered. I mean, it's just the power and the corruption, the violence, and you just want to just end it. Just end it. It reminded me of I think there was a certain point in World War II, some of the people in the whether the Japanese internment camps or the German concentration camps, and the kind of cruelty that they were undergoing, are practically begging for the Allies to come and bomb us, just put us out of our misery. It is so horrible what we're enduring. You are, even though they're dropping bombs on you, you're thankful for it because it will end the evil and the violence and the misery that you're enduring. And so there's this point now. The Lord gives commands now to make an ark, and that's where we left off last time. So he gives them the commands. And it concludes with verse 22, that Noah did all that God commanded him. And so now we're going to pick it up in chapter 7. So that first paragraph, verses 1 to 5. Bob Thomas, you want to get that for us here? 1 to 5.
Then the Lord said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of clean animals, the male and his mate, and a pair of the animals that are not clean, the male and his mate, and 7 pairs of birds of the heavens also, male and female, to keep their offspring alive on the face of the earth. For in 7 days I will send rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, And every living thing that I have made, I will blot out from the face of the ground. And Noah did all that the Lord had commanded him.
All right, so let's take a look at this part here. So now the Lord speaks to Noah. And he gives him this command. He says some very interesting things here. First, he gives him, what's the first command he gives him now in this section?
Go into
Go
the
into-
ark.
Yeah, go into the ark. And not just you, but you and your household. How many is that total? Do you remember?
8.
That is 8. That's correct. This over here for a second. And your household. That would be 8 in total. All right. And then he says something about him. He says, I have seen that you are righteous before me. So the question is this, is what did God see? What was the evidence that Noah was a righteous man?
He was doing what God asked him to do.
Yeah, that's what's stated to him. That's the only thing that's stated about him really is all that the Lord had commanded him, he did. And so that's really this kind of this definition of righteousness, that righteousness is seen in Noah's obedience. Noah's obedience to God's word. God told him to build an ark, and he built an ark. You know, the Lord told him those things. That's how you know that Noah believed the Lord, that he trusted him. He
Didn't
did.
Noah walk with God?
Yeah, it does say that about him too. He did. He walked with God. And so that whole thing, he is not rebelling against God. He's not running from God. He is walking with God. Yeah, absolutely. And it's seen in what we've seen, how we ended with chapter 6. Noah did what the Lord commanded him. And again, in chapter 7, verse 5, Noah did all that the Lord had commanded him, really stressing that point. So the commands then are, the Lord's commands now continue regarding this. So there's a little bit more specifics that we weren't given before. What does he say about this, what Noah is to do now?
Take 7 pairs of the clean and 2 pairs of the unclean.
Yes, so we're going to take 7 pairs. I always thought it was just like 2 by 2, right? That everyone was 2 by 2, but now we're told, actually, no, when it came to the clean animals, 7 pairs of all clean animals. Do you remember
Which were
what the,
considered what?
yeah, what are the clean animals? Anyone know offhand?
I forgot, but there's a thing about the hoofs, divided hoofs and all this
Yeah.
other stuff.
Mhm.
But
We're
did
not-
they know it at this time? Was Noah aware of clean and unclean? I thought that didn't come until, later in mankind.
Yeah, it's kind of like the sacrifice of Abel. The instructions on sacrifices come later in the book of the law, but they would have known, they just hadn't recorded them. Abel knew what he was doing when he sacrifices a lamb to the Lord. He would have known the meaning of it and the proper way to do it. We weren't told the instructions that Abel had received, but Moses will later on, when he speaks to all of Israel, will lay out for them specifically what the clean animals are, what the unclean are, the proper use of sacrifices. So our assumption is that, yeah, Noah knew exactly what a clean animal was and an unclean was. However, we don't know just yet until Moses will tell us later in when he gets into Exodus. But for now, yeah, go ahead.
Are the clean animals for them to eat in their travels? Because there's going to be, more than a pair.
Yeah, they will be not on the boat. They won't eat them on the boat, but afterwards, God will permit Noah and his family to eat the animals now. At this point, he didn't give him the go ahead on eating animals. That they may have been eating them already. Probably, I'm guessing that they would have.
Well, if they knew what was clean and unclean, they probably, that's what determined what they would eat.
Yeah, yeah, well, but also the clean would be, clean animals, there are two purposes in the New Testament, in the Old Testament for clean animals. One is for eating. What's the other one?
Sacrificing.
Yeah, for sacrifice, right? For worship, for eating and one for worship and sacrifice. They were not sacrificed unclean animals. So these clean animals were those that were approved by the Lord. And they had a different, was it the cloven and the hoof? Chewing the cud. I can't remember what it was, some of the things. Basically, you're dealing with some of the animals, like the scavenger animals were considered unclean. Whereas, so animals that ate like dead bodies would have been considered unclean. The shellfish that, eat the dead things off the bottom of the ocean, they are considered unclean, whereas the fish are fine, scales are fine. So he breaks it down in detail later on.
It's interesting that he even says take unclean animals, I find.
Yeah, well, he does. He says, take the 7 pairs of unclean male and its mate and a pair of animals that are not clean. So take 1 pair of unclean animals. So unclean doesn't mean that they're bad. Doesn't mean they serve a purpose, right? I mean, think about the unclean animals today, like, I don't know, vultures. They're pretty gross. They're an unclean animal, right? But what purpose do they serve?
Yeah, they eat carrion.
Yeah, I mean, if it weren't for the buzzards, I mean, you would have decaying carcasses all over the place and disease. They really do a good service, even though they're unclean. So unclean is not a moral thing. It's that which is, it's usually connected with death in some way. There's a necessary purpose of death. It's a necessary evil that they provide a service. The worms, the decaying, things like that. But it's not an immoral thing. It's just that as far as that cannot come into the presence of God.
Yeah,
And-
I was thinking just of something like pigs, they were told to stay away from pigs, for example. But I
Yeah.
guess you could say the same thing, right? The pigs eat swill.
Yeah, I mean, they're symbolically, they're usually attached to death or blood or some things like that. So, yeah, but they're still good. They're just unclean. Okay, so it's not a moral thing. Like a leper that's not a moral state that he's in. He's unclean, but he's not a sinner in this because he has leprosy, or that he's more of a sinner than anyone else. It's just that he is unclean and not permitted to come into the presence of the clean society of the presence of the Lord, and he has to stay away from that. Though he may still be in God's grace and still be considered righteous, though he is unclean. So, any case, where we leave off here: 7 pairs of clean animals, 1 pair not clean. And then what else? Next he says.
And the birds.
Yeah, 7
Okay.
pairs of the birds. Okay. All right. And then he says, when is he saying all this? Well, he gives us some timing now. There's some different days. So in 7 days, I will send rain. For how long?
40 days and
40
40
days,
nights.
40 nights. Okay. Let's talk about this. Yeah, go ahead.
I just imagine Noah asking God, what's rain?
Oh, he knows what rain is. He absolutely knows what rain is. Come on. In 7 days, I'll send rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights, every living thing that made it, I will blot out from the face of the ground. Okay, let's talk about the numbers here. The numbers seem to be important here. We just went through Revelation. Can you remember some of the significance of numbers here? What's the number 7 mean?
Complete.
It is a complete number, but it's more than that.
It's God's.
Yeah.
Number.
This is God's number,
Mm.
belonging to God. So the 7, that's the 7 pairs of the clean animals. Even the 7 there signifies, it's not like, you need to have 7 to keep them alive. Well, you could have had, 3 or 4, but 7 really shows they emphasize these are holy, belonging to the Lord. They'll be for special purposes. And then you have in 7 days, again, this is the coming in 7 days, I will send the rain, the judgment's coming in 7 days. What about the 40? 40 is a combination of 4 and 10, 4 times 10. Remember what 4 represented?
All
4
creation.
points of the compass.
Yeah, 4 is the number of creation. Of all the earth, basically. The 4 points of the compass. And then 10, that is
Fullness.
yeah, that's a fullness. That's a completion or fullness. So what's about to happen is in 40 days, for 40 days and 40 nights, this judgment will be over all the earth. It's a complete judgment. It's not a partial judgment. It's a complete judgment of them all. And it will be of all the earth. And that's the 40 is significant there. So keep notes of 40s. You're going to see, what are some other 40s you've seen in the Bible?
Jesus went into the wilderness for 40 days.
Yeah.
When he
Mhm.
rose, he stayed for 40 days.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly right. And both of those things pertain to, and remember in the wilderness, the devil shows him all the nations of the world, emphasizing he's being tempted here, not just for the salvation of Israel, but for all the world. This temptation he's enduring. And it's a complete temptation. He's fully tempted as we are. And the 40 days with them afterwards as well, as he's preparing them to now go off and to complete that mission to all the world. You see 40 years in the wilderness for Israel as they're fully tested there. You see
A lot of the kings ruled for 40 years.
it's true. The first 3 kings ruled for 40 years. So, all right. So that's our first section there. Any questions on that so far? Let's continue.
So you're saying it may not have actually rained literally 40 days.
Oh, I think it did.
It did, okay.
Oh, I think it did. Why? Yeah. I will send rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Yeah, I think it did. But the significance of the 40, why does he do it for 40 days? Could have done it for 50 days. He could have done it for 30 days. It didn't have to be, it doesn't take that long to kill everybody, to wipe it clean, but it's going to be for 40 days that it's going to be raining and coming hard on them. So let's pick it up from there. 6 to 10. Bob Fowler, you want to get that for us?
Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters came upon the earth. And Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him went into the ark to escape the waters of the flood, of clean animals and of animals that are not clean, and of birds and of everything that creeps on the ground. Two and two, male and female, went into the ark with Noah, as God had commanded Noah. After 7 days, the waters of the flood came upon the earth.
All right, so now we're reminded of Noah's age. Noah's 600 years old. How old were his sons at that point? Anyone know the math? Do you remember how old Noah was when he had his sons?
120.
No. It was before then. I think it's the end of chapter 5. Let's see if we got that up here. I think it was the end of chapter 5. It says his age. Yeah, there we go. If you see it end there. Noah was 500 years old.
500.
Yeah. When he fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. I don't know if they were triplets or if they were just, that's when he began to father them and he boom, boom, boom. But in any case, that would mean his sons are, they're not spring
100
chickens.
100 years old.
They're 100 years old too. So,
Yeah.
did I lose my place here? Okay. So, according to that, so his sons would have been about 100 years old.
Hmm.
Okay. All right. And they didn't have any kids yet. So they probably had about 80 years in their wives. See how that goes. I try not to think about the age of these guys. It kind of ruins the story a little bit. You know, like when you get to Jacob, you know, that love story of Jacob and Rachel, you
Mm.
know, a beautiful story. And it kind of ruins it a little bit when you realize that Jacob's in his 70s when this all happens. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not quite as romantic as I thought it was. Okay. So,
Hmm.
all right. So let's pick it up here. No, 600 years old. And now what happens here is, let's go through the list of what happens. So it gives the dates. What happens next here, verse 7?
They entered the ark.
Okay. So the family enters the ark, and it says specifically to escape the flood. Okay.
Mm.
And then also, what else happened next?
The animals went in.
The animals.
All the animals went in with Noah. Now here's the question: is how did Noah manage that?
Hmm.
Noah managed everything by the grace of God.
Yeah. Yeah. It's up. Go ahead, Rob.
No, I was just saying, he was just saying, here, buddies, come on. No, much.
They somehow all became domesticated at that point, just well-trained animals, and they just kind of go in the ark as they do. That's a little minor miracle when you think about that, just getting them all in there. All right, and then after 7 days, the water comes on the earth. Okay, so then the water. So let's take a look at the flood and what happens in the flood. What comes after 7 days? As he said. Let's pick it up from there. Let's see. Jack, you want to get this next part here? 11 to 16. Is that big enough?
Yes. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, and on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. The rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them entered the ark. They and every beast according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kind, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, every winged creature. They went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2, all the flesh in which there was a breath of life. And those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in.
Okay. All right, now we're given the date here. So this is the date of the flood. How is it described to us? What is the official date of the flood?
The 600th year of Noah's life.
Okay, yeah, so it's going to be year 600
Okay.
of Noah's life. The month,
The second month, February, maybe?
okay, and then the 17th day.
Mm.
Okay, day 17. So if we were to type it out, it would be what, 2/17/600. We'll go with that. If we start time with Noah's birth, at that point. Okay. Now let's look at what happens. How does the flood come? It's really interesting of how it goes. It's not simply just rain falling, is it?
No, water
Found
comes
that
up
to
from
be
the
very,
ground.
Say that again, Teresa?
well, too. I found that to be very interesting as well, because I've never realized that before, that it came from the earth as well.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
water.
So it's twofold. The fountains of the deep burst forth. The great deep. Wow.
Psalm 136:6, I have a note here, says that. He says that God established the earth above the waters.
Mhm.
Psalm 136:6. I think the implication being that there's water below us.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can see that in, we all have, wells or, these kind of systems where we're getting our water from below.
mm,
Fountains of the great burst forth, and then the windows of heaven were open. And that's where the rain falls.
mm.
Okay, so what's going on here? There's some really interesting things here. The way it's described, did you notice some of the language following this that sounds familiar to you in that paragraph? After he enters the ark with their wives, and then it uses a phrase that we've heard before in verses 14, 15, and 16.
According to its kind.
Yeah, do you remember that? Where have we heard that before?
Creation story.
When he
Yeah.
created animals.
According to their kinds. This is a reminder of, this goes going back to creation again. And so one thing you're seeing is, if you remember how the creation was began, how did creation begin? Remember what was the starting point of creation? It wasn't nothing. I mean, we say God created everything out of nothing in one sense, but when the creation story begins, when God begins his work, he begins with something. And what was the something, if you remember?
The Spirit hovering over the waters.
Yes, the Spirit hovering over the waters. Teresa, you going to say that? I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say the earth was void and formless.
Yeah, remember the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the earth, and the Spirit is hovering over the waters. And so we're just before creation. Remember, the earth, if you want to call it the earth, was just a watery mass. It was the chaos, the waters. There was no form to it, and it was empty, an empty, watery mass without life. And now what's happening is, and then God separated the waters. If you remember, he says, "Let there be light," and he separates the waters from below and the waters from above. And then he brings forth the land. And so you're seeing now a reversal of that, where with the rain for 40 days, basically the lights are out, the clouds cover, the darkness would certainly descend on that regard. Not that it would be pitch black, but the light of the sun would be sort of obscured. But then you also have the collapse now of the waters that had been separated are now reuniting in a sense. The waters from below are bursting forth, the windows of the heavens are open, they're pouring down, and you kind of come back to this watery mass once again. It's like he's just going back again to start over again. And that's where we begin. So that's why the flood it happens the way it does. The flood is bringing the creation back to the beginning. And now there'll be a new creation forming here, a new start to humanity. Okay. All right. And then we conclude with an interesting word there at the end. All the animals, all the birds, all the creatures come into the ark. And what happens next at the end? How does it end?
The Lord shuts the door.
Yeah.
You
And
should see how big that door is.
Mm,
yeah, did they describe?
No handles. They
Hmm.
showed it. It was awesome. It was
Were
huge.
there- Were there measurements in the Bible for the door? Do you remember?
Mhm. I think there were.
I,
There had to be.
I mean, you should want to give it. Were they mentioned to us? I can't remember.
I don't think so.
Okay. But it would have to be a big door. You can't. I'm sorry, Jack, you got to move closer.
You just went by it. Now I don't know where it is though, so.
Okay, chapter 6, I'm sure. Make a roof,
There it
And
is.
at the door of the ark and its side. It doesn't say how big that door would be, but I think they would be correct. It would be a big door. I mean, if you're going to have animals coming in that are some are very large animals, you've got to have a door for that. Some have asked the question. Did they ask the question at the Creation Museum? Were there dinosaurs on the ark?
Yes,
Yeah,
what they
they actually showed animal types, like there was an archetype of a dog, an archetype of cat and stuff like that, and they had like a gator-like dinosaur type that they were showing. It was a lot more,
Prehistoric.
yeah, it was a lot more prehistoric than you're led to believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you look at, I tell you what, if you've been on when we went to Africa and go on a safari, you feel like you're in Jurassic Park. I mean, the animals are just the giraffes. I mean, they are just incredible to see in person, and the rhinoceros. I mean, you know, I mean, Triceratops seems like it's just a big rhinoceros, for goodness sake, and all those animals. So yeah. All right, so all the animals enter the ark. We're not told about the dinosaurs, what that was about, but if they were alive, they were considered part of the creation. They certainly would have been welcome. Enter the ark, and the Lord shut him in. That's interesting. Those that entered the ark, men and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him. And the Lord shut him in. So he's referring to Noah there. Okay.
You know, the NASB says, and the Lord closed it behind him.
Okay.
Mm.
Shut him in. Interesting phrase. So yeah, God shut the door, closed it up, sealed it. That's very interesting. Any thoughts on that? What that might mean?
I think it means that if you're in the ark, you're safe
Hmm. Yeah.
from the wrath that is to come, the wrath being
Yeah,
the
get
flood.
ready, here it comes.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, you could say, look, I think it's a reminder that Noah was the one who built the ark,
Mm,
but it's the Lord's ark. The Lord built this ship. He's the one. He gave the directions to him to do. It's the Lord's provision to Noah. It's
and-
not Noah's creative idea of how we can be saved. It's like the Lord did this. Go ahead. Sorry, Elizabeth.
I was gonna say, and Noah was probably the last one in the ark to make sure everyone had gotten in as the Lord commanded. So Noah was in, and it was safe to shut the door at that
Yeah,
point.
I think that would be about right. Yeah, that would make sense. So
I get the
All right, let's-
impression that God orchestrated the whole thing. I mean, Noah didn't have to round up the animals came
mhm.
to him.
Mm.
And when God knew that everyone was ready, that was it. He locked the door.
Yeah, really, and I think that's a really important point. You know, the story of Noah and the ark is not that Noah somehow got wind of that God's going to destroy the earth, and he got together with the best minds and came up with a plan.
Mhm.
It's like the Lord did this. The Lord was the one. Noah is saved only because the Lord was pleased to save him and his family.
Mhm.
The Lord gave him the instructions. The Lord closed him in. The Lord brought the animals to him. All this is the work of the Lord.
You can kind of see how the other people around him might think he was crazy for building the ark, but you think something would have struck them when all these animals started showing up.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but the funny thing is that when people are in sin and full of pride and rebelliousness, they lack awareness. You know, think about Pharaoh and his armies when the Red Sea is split and they charge in after the Israelites. They never think for a minute, I wonder why the Red Sea is split like this. That doesn't typically happen. And that, you know, maybe God is fighting for them, and they only realize it once they're inside and can't get out.
Right. Yeah.
So there is, I always tell my son that, you know, sin makes you stupid. That's how this goes. It just makes you stupid. when you're in rebellion and sin, you do things that make no sense. You ignore things and you ignore all the signs, and you go full steam ahead. And I think the world is in such rebellion to God that even if he had come down and as an angel of light and appeared to them all, telling them what to do, they would deceive themselves into not following that. I just think so.
Talks about hardening their hearts.
Yeah, like again, like with Pharaoh. I mean, how many plagues do you need to see that the Lord is, you need to get right here? And these folks are depraved. They are thoroughly depraved. So let's continue, 17 to 24. And where do we live off? Teresa, would you get that for us? Is that big enough, Lizzie?
A little more, please.
Okay, I'm trying to do this without.
All right, just leave it. I'll get it.
Yep.
Thank you, Pastor.
Hold on a second. Let me get it for you. Okay, get it nice and big here. All right, how's that?
Good.
Okay.
The flood continued 40 days on the earth. The waters increased and bore up the ark and rose it high above the earth. The waters prevailed and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The water prevailed above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep. All the flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, livestock, beasts, all swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all mankind. Everything on the dry land in whose nostrils was the life of breath died. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days.
Okay. All right. Let's we get a little bit of a time now. So we had, before we had the date of the flood. What was the date of the flood, if you remember? Date of flood was
4,400 years ago, right? Basically.
yeah, it would be 600 according to, if we're going to go with they're dating this according to the years of Noah. So we'll say it was 217, 600 in the year of Noah. Okay. And then he says, so now the months, if I'm not mistaken, are 30 days. Is that correct? Anyone know offhand? Is that about right? How many in their months? Not sure, but so 40 days it rains for 40 days. And what does it say happens during that time?
The waters cover everything, every mountain.
Yes. So the two things happen. First, it's very interesting. The rain, the waters are doing two things in this.
Rose up the ark.
Yeah, so the rains and the waters are prevailing now. Waters prevail, and there are two things they're doing. One is the waters are raising up the ark, and so it's floating above on the face of the waters. Very similar to the language we heard earlier. Remember how the creation story began? The earth was formless and void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. And the Spirit was doing what?
Hovering.
Hovering over the waters. And so here we have the ark floating on the face of the waters. At this point, it kind of recalls a little bit the whole point of the Spirit, if you remember, hovering over the waters is it creates this anticipation that there's God over the waters waiting to do his work now. And so now we have there's a waiting period here. The 40 days of judgment have come and the waters have prevailed. But now the ark is there floating, and it's just going to be waiting now, waiting. And how long will it be that the waters will prevail? Did you catch that?
150 days.
Yeah, that will be 150 days. We'll come back to that in a second. The 150 days. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that the months are considered about 30 days for months. So the waters are raising up the ark, floating on the face of the waters, and the waters are doing what? They're not just raising up the ark, floating, but they are also blotting out all life on the earth. So you can see again, the same waters that are bringing judgment are also bringing salvation and preparing a new world for God's new family here. How great was the prevailing of the waters? He tells us how deep were these waters?
It went above everything, went above the mountains.
Isn't it like 15 cubits above the highest points?
That's what I'm assuming. Yeah, covered everything, every mountain, by 15 cubits, which is,
It's yeah,
how much is that?
About
15
40
times
feet.
18. Quick, Pastor, you're the math major. 15
All right,
times
well, 15 cubits, 1 cubit is 1.5 feet. So we're looking at what, 20,
22 and a half.
22 feet, 22 and a half, yeah.
22.5 feet. Really showing that it's a complete coverage because there's no one that can survive that. You know, if it covered the mountains by like 3 feet, then you know you could maybe stand at the tippy top and not be covered. But this sufficiently shows that look, everything's covered. There's nothing that's not covered with water. So
I find it amazing what archaeologists have found in some of the hills as far as fossils. They're unexplainable. The unbelievers will try to say, well, the birds dropped it off, but we're talking about something much bigger than a bird dropping stuff
Yeah.
off. It's unexplainable otherwise. You know, sea creatures up in the top of mountains and things like this.
yeah, there really is interesting. The flood's a game changer. It really, it just, you know, a lot of science is based on sort of certain assumptions that things happen gradually over time. That's really the theory of evolution, right? That over time, things gradually happen and just give it enough time and things will change eventually. And that's true to kind of a degree. However, it doesn't account for catastrophes, things that happen, to great events that change things dramatically overnight. So something like, you know, they see the Grand Canyon and they say that's the result of a river, you know, bearing that down over millions of years. Well, that's one explanation, but could it be, oh, I don't know, some kind of catastrophic event in which the ground opened up and the flood waters poured out, and suddenly you have these great canyons all of a sudden, you know, or if you look at the way that the continental drift, you have Africa and South America clearly once fit together. You can see how they're set up. And their assumption is, well, that just happened over time. Well, could it have possibly happened? Oh, I don't know, in a 40-day period where the earth opens up and splits things apart, you know?
Yeah.
There's a lot to think about here that the Noah.
Well, they
It's
have another
catastrophic.
150 days to float, to move around.
So again, yeah, they got this, but you know, when things dry out, but things are clearly broken apart by this
Yeah.
flood. If it's just coming from the rain, that would be one thing, but it's coming from below too. It's bursting forth. So it's driving things apart. And so you can kind of see when you look at the map of the globe, it looks like it was once a singular mass that's been blown apart. And that's clearly, and that's what they believe. They just think it was blown apart. It happened over millions of years. But the flood story seems to suggest there might be another explanation for this. So it's really interesting how it kind of goes. But by the way, did you see the I think they did they were talking about the flood. I can't remember which series it was, but they showed some scenes from these these valleys and these rivers and this incredible canyons that they showed. And they said, this was, according to science, this would have taken millions of years to happen. And then he tells you, no, this is from Mount St. Helens when it exploded. It created instantly all these canyons that you see here when it
Yeah.
exploded. It's really interesting. It's like, wow, okay.
Mm.
There are other explanations. So
I have flown very low by Mount St. Helens and I am stunned. I would be stunned even today, what I saw.
Yeah.
I mean, every one of the trees are lying down from the top of the mountain, facing down to the ground. I mean, every one of them. And the whole top of the mountain looks like a rotten molar.
yeah,
Exactly what it looks like. It's
it's
amazing.
incredible. Yeah, it's incredible. And so, I mean, that's why the flood story is really interesting, because all the ancient faiths also have a flood story. It's like everyone kind of knows something happened here.
Mhm.
And that's the only difference is the Bible tells it in a way that's actually believable. The other
Mhm.
stories are crazy stories, but they all kind of refer to a flood, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, famous ancient text, has a flood story in it. Well, so
Mm.
all right. So covered mountain by 15 cubits. So basically emphasizing there's no survivors. Everything on the dry land would died. So basically what you see is it's a judgment on the ground because it's on the dry land. And that is, if you remember, that was what was cursed. It was the ground that was cursed. It wasn't the waters that were cursed when Adam and Eve sinned. It was the ground that was cursed. Now it comes to its full fruition, and it's the ground that will be blotted out and everything on it wiped away.
Mm.
And Noah was left, and we'll kind of close with this here. Claudia, just in time for our closing here. Good to see you. So good to have you. They're blotted out from the earth, and Noah was left. And how long are they on the ark now? How long are they going to be there waiting?
5 months.
Yeah. For 150 days, which is 5 months.
Mm.
That is again, the number 5, from what I've understood, I think we talked about this in Revelation. Do you remember what the number 5 was?
I didn't think there was a number 5, was there?
Yeah, there was one actually in the Revelation. There was a reference to things happening for 5 months. If you remember, let me see if I can find that real quick. When we did it, let me see, pull it up real quick. Sorry about that. Should have been prepared. All right, let me zoom in here. Share screen. All right, so it was like 5. I think it said, was it 5 months, if I'm not mistaken. And probably should be, yeah, it was Revelation 9:5. And we had it was the locusts that were allowed to torment them for 5 months, but not to kill them.
Mm.
And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings someone. So there was this time period when God was judging the earth and sending the locusts, these scorpions, these demonic hordes from the bottomless pit, and they torment those on the earth for 5 months. It's kind of interesting. So some have said that the 5 is a sort of a in the context of a judgment. It's like sort of a bit of grace here of the patience of God. He doesn't kill them. He's not destroying them instantly. They're not allowed to kill them during that time. So there's this sense of he's giving them grace to repent even in the time further of his patience. So there's some of that possibly going on here, the significance of the 150 days. I'm kind of guessing a little bit with you guys here. I can't speak authoritatively on that, but I lost my place here. Where are we here? Okay. Got it. Are we back? Yes.
Hmm.
But some say that that's a number of grace. And so even in the midst of judgment, as he's now kind of, there's a waiting period here now for
Mm.
God and again. And it's 150 days, these 5 months after the judgment. So it's 40 days of judgment and then 150 days of waiting for the waters now to recede. So we'll kind of leave it there. Any last questions, comments about chapter 7 of Genesis?
Must have really stunk on that ark, that's all I can say.
Yeah. A long time. That's a long time to be there. But yeah, well provided. So, and I don't know, Jack and Teresa, you saw the Ark Museum, right? Were there any insights on that were helpful to you, as that you kind of saw how they portrayed the Ark and some of the things that it was for that time?
I thought it was very interesting how it was set up, how God watered all the animals and, we put a hole on the top deck and then it would go down through a tunnel and then it would fan out.
Hmm.
The ways it showed how it was possible for such a small family to take care of all those animals.
Hmm.
Showed how all the food was set up and how they transferred it all, and it made sense.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of made sense how it all worked, because when you really think about it, how do people take care of all those animals for all that time?
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah. Now there's some interesting theories about how it could happen too. It's like sometimes people forget that he doesn't say what size the animals were. He
Right.
didn't have to take 2 full-grown elephants. He could take 2 baby ones with him.
Right.
So there's a lot more space now. If you think about if you can get them at smaller stages, and did God put them into a sleep where like they could hibernate for that time? She certainly could have done that too.
Mm.
There are a lot of ways that he could have. I mean, it's certainly possible. I appreciate the efforts there. I mean, that's a pretty intense way to display it, but it does kind of show that the possibilities of how things could happen. And then also that a lot of the animal species, you say, well, there's so many species out there. There's no way they could have done that. But you got to remember, species is a term that we invented. And we know that there are a lot of these species that can, a wolf is a dog. I mean, they're the same species. You don't have to take a wolf and a fox and a dog and a Chihuahua and a Great Dane. It's like there's really just one
Mm.
would suffice. So they can figure that out. But all right, very good. Thank you. Let me stop recording.